So,
I hear an echo. Why do
because
we
it's
hear?
this. I'm trying to, because I'm here. I'm here.
Okay.
I'm trying to show you. Oh, all right. So I can't even show you.
Now don't worry about me.
All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. How do I get out of here? Let me hang up. Let me kick me out. Can I kick me out? All right. So I guess we doesn't give us. It doesn't give us a. It doesn't give them a sitting area. It was hot. All right. Let's go ahead and get it popping. I'm gonna go ahead and do
So
it
the
now.
viewers hear the music I'm playing.
Yes, they can hear everything now because we're live.
Okay.
I mean, you always can go back when it's time for us to re-edit this. You can always go ahead and add this back behind me
Oh yeah,
when
yeah. I
I'm
can
reading
do
this
that.
part.
Right. Right.
All right, yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and read this now. We can edit all this out right now too.
Okay. Do your thing.
Before the chains, before the ships, before the names were stripped and the languages lost, there was spirit, there was order, there was us. The transatlantic slave trade did more than just traffic bodies. It trafficked souls. It hijacked our sacred systems and replaced them with doctrines designed to divide, suppress, and control. Today, many of us are clinging to beliefs passed down by colonizers, not ancestors. But what if we told you that returning to balance, to truth. Oh, wait, I gotta go back because I gotta cut you out. I gotta turn you off. All
And
right,
you know
hold
what?
on.
I think while you're talking, I got to stop this music.
I can't hear the music right now.
Oh, you can't?
I actually found out something too. We're just gonna restart this. That way we don't have to cut all this out. I can just restart it. I found that
Okay.
out the other day. I was like, oh yes, and there's less editing. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and fix this layout. Full screen. Oh no. Yeah, you gotta turn it off because it's recognizing you as the talker, as the speaker.
Yeah, I turned it off.
So why are you still there? Oh no, you know what? I gotta hide you. That's what it is. I gotta hide you. Okay. But where am I at? I still this is still here, so you gotta turn the screen off.
I got to turn the screen off.
Yeah, you gotta turn it off because even when I cut you out, it stays there. There we go. Perfect. Okay, here we go. Action. Before the chains, before the whips, before the names were stripped and the language is lost, there was spirit, there was order, there was us. The transatlantic slave trade did more than just traffic bodies, it trafficked souls. It hijacked our sacred systems. It hijacked souls. Oh, I'm gonna redo that because my shoe dropped. Before the chains, before the whips. Oh, I gotta start over again. I messed up. Before the chains, before the ships, before the names were stripped and the language is lost, there was spirit, there was order, there was us. The transatlantic slave trade did more than just traffic bodies, it trafficked souls. It hijacked our sacred systems and replaced them with doctrines designed to divide, suppress, and control. Today, many of us are clinging to beliefs passed down by colonizers, not ancestors. But what if we told you that returning to balance, to truth, to who we were, is the key to becoming whole again? And this episode begins that journey. This episode begins that journey. Welcome to We Are Not Okay, the podcast where truth lives and healing begins. I'm your host, and my co-host Nasir will be joining us any second. Today we open a new series called Journey of the Soul. And in part one, we're dividing into symbolism and the spirituality and the struggle within. We're pulling back the curtain on the spiritual aftermath of the transatlantic slave trade, the human trafficking, the exploitation, the stripping of identity through systemic racism and forced religion. We ask the hard questions. What happens when your faith is inherited but not rooted? What happens when the prophets you're told to follow have no historical proof and no cultural connection to your people? We're not here to judge, we're here to awaken. So, what's the solution? We believe it's in the systems before the boats, before colonization, before the Bible, the Torah, the Quran were used as, I'm gonna back up to that. Before the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran were used as tools of submission, it's time to return spiritual systems rooted in harmony and justice. Principles like Ma'at and the Nguzo Saba. Through study groups, through dialogue, through intentional unlearning and sacred remembering. Because to reclaim our future, we must first reclaim our soul. And with that, let me introduce you to my co-host, Nasir. Welcome, the good brother. How are you tonight?
I'm doing wonderful. Hotep.
Hotep, Hotep.
Hotepu to the viewers, the audience. It's good to see you.
Always good to see the good brother. I love this information that we gather for tonight. Is so informative that we definitely cannot pack it all into 1 hour. I mean, part one is what it is. It may end up being part five to this because there's so much information and so much to unpack. And we're just eager to hear what you all have to say. Please tell us in the comments what you think of this topic and what do you expect to hear from it? What would you like to hear from it as well? We want to hear from you. And what do you have for us, the good brother?
Well, I tell you what, while I tee this up, I
Mm-hmm.
always say that, I try to keep, my feet on the ground. A lot of times I don't deal with the topics of spirituality and religion and things of that nature, but because of the effect that it has on our people,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Very necessary. Big time.
Um,
Big time.
from time to time, I do have to touch on it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I'll do today is draw a distinction between spirituality and religious dogma.
I love that. I love that. So I mean, before we even get into well, I hope you broke it down into like, very small pieces for people because this can be a very it's definitely a heavy topic. But I just don't want it to be like scary heavy. It's definitely something that is probably a little bit uncomfortable, but that's what we do here.
That's what we do. We deal with the
Have
uncomfortable.
those uncomfortable and elevating, evolving conversations.
Okay, so let's get into it, right?
Let's do it.
Let's get into it. So, I always like to have something to aim our discussion
Mm-hmm.
and frame our discussion around. And one of the things that we want to be able to accomplish is just to give people options, right? Is this is
Yes.
we're not going to hold you down, wrestle you to the mat, and try to convince you of anything, right? We're going to
Mm-hmm.
provide information, for the people, um, and we will let them decide, how they move forward.
Right.
Uh, and so, in saying that, we're still dealing with the psychological trauma of
Absolutely. We
as
are.
a result of the transatlantic slave trade, which is human trafficking. That's what we would call it in today's terms, right? Um, we
They gave it
also
a different name. What was the name they gave it? It was
they
they
call
gave
it
it a different name.
slavery.
No,
What do you mean?
they're calling it some kind of other. They're
Oh,
dressing it
now they're
up.
calling it
Voluntary. What is it?
involuntary migration. That's
Yes,
bananas.
involuntary. What?
No, we're not doing that. We're not
Like
doing that.
who said? Crazy.
Yeah, we're not doing that. Um,
Absolutely not.
and the other prong that we have to deal with is um, colonization. Western Europe, came down into Africa and colonized the West Coast, and they extracted a lot of wealth. And with that wealth, they extracted power on the global
Yes.
stage. And then the last thing is what we currently deal with day to day, which is systematic racism, which is it's a system. I like to refer to it as a system,
Yeah, I'm like we
and
do it with systemic and systematic, really.
and that system is a system of advantages and disadvantages and privilege. All right. So that's what we're going to focus on is providing people options on how they navigate around this trauma and how they deal with it. But to get specific into it, when I sit down and analyze this situation, there's a couple things, right? You know, the trauma rears its head in the day-to-day problems in our communities, right?
Right.
Everything from the gun violence, um, you know, we don't support each other's businesses, like other groups do. You
Yeah.
know, you go on social media, everything is over sexualized, right? Um, and we when we deal with the loss of our indigenous systems, right? We can't forget that we were not allowed to speak our native languages nor practice our indigenous spiritual systems.
I don't think people
And
understand how serious that is.
and even if we were, we had to hide it. We
Right.
had to hide it in Christianity, right? And so a good example of that is, um, in some of the Latin American uh, uh, areas in the Caribbean, they practice like Santeria, right? And so where they have their deities and so forth, secretly some of them are recognized as African deities, right? But it's been watered down and altered, over time, and so we actually lost the you know being able to have direct access to our spiritual systems, which would guide our morality and how we managed our communities. And then we have within the religious dogma or religion community, um, we don't know the difference. The common person doesn't understand the difference between religion and spirituality,
Right.
right? I tell
That's
people
true.
I'm spiritual, right? But I'm not religious, you know,
Same. Same.
right? So, okay, we're on the same page as far as that is concerned. And if viewers, have questions about that, they can always put it in the chat and we can address it. as we need to. And then, because we came over and, some of us were even, practicing Islam in Africa at the time, because remember,
Hmm.
the Arabs had come over into North Africa and also in the west and east coast of Africa and spread Islam by the sword, right? So,
Hmm.
some of our ancestors were practicing Islam prior to, coming over into the Americas. But even so, once you came into the Americas, right, you were Christianized, right?
Well, that's what we was talking about that before about their term the melting pot. When you came here, you just fell into line. You did not bring up anything that you practiced before you got here. You fell into
Yeah.
line. Hmm.
And so that was lost between the language and direct, connection to our spiritual system was lost.
Yep.
And a lot of times when I engage in the conversation with people about religion, the first thing that I do is I ask them, what were we practicing before we got to America? And a lot of times the light bulb goes off. But then, our our people and our, some of our elders and even some of the young people, set in their ways,
Yes.
once you're exposed to it,
Especially our elders.
they don't really want to upset the apple cart. And it's something, we have to deal with. And that is
Yeah.
not ours, right? It was given to us, it was forced upon us. And if we can continue that tradition, that is on us now, once we know.
This is very true. But I had a friend of mine, she's a sister friend. Her parents very, very, very religious. I mean, like we was in church a couple times a week. And now my sister friend is older. She's like, no, she doesn't even like she won't even let her mother pray over her son. And she's like, I'm not I know you have no harm, you mean no harm, but it can sneak in. The spirits can sneak in different ways. And she called her mother out on it. Was like, why do you still practice this way? And her mother, she broke it down to her like, you don't. There's no proof that that happened. Whatever, whatever. Her mother said, it's just what I know, what I'm used to. So they
Right,
know.
right.
Some of them you could break it down to them where it doesn't make sense, and they just that's what they know, and or they bring in faith. They
Yeah,
bring
they
in
did.
that's where their
Yeah,
faith is. Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. So we'll deal with some of those topics. And
Mm-hmm.
so, even when we talk about Christianity, right? Christianity is touted as it doesn't accept pagan, ideology within the confines of the religious dogma, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
that is completely not true. And I go straight for, well, let me ask you if, we're talking about the birth of Jesus Christ, right? What does the Christmas tree have to do in the Yuletide log, right? What does that have to do with the celebration around his birth?
None of it.
And then I asked him, well, do you know where it comes
Mm-mm.
from, right? And 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 I asked,
Most of them don't.
most of them do not, absolutely. Then the other thing is when you ask them, well, okay, well, Christianity is really based on his death and resurrection, right? His
Mm-hmm.
death and resurrection. And so, what does the Easter bunny and the Easter egg have to do with his death and resurrection, right?
Money, but even still, they don't even make sense.
Yeah. But what the people are not aware of is those are pagan rites and rituals that were brought in as new converts came into Christianity. And because they wanted to grow the Christian community, they allowed some of those things to come in. I even get into Valentine's Day, St. Valentine, and, the
Yeah.
chocolate and the blood and all that good stuff.
I mean, we can stay on Christmas with Nimrod Day and those balls on the trees.
Right.
But I
Nothing
digress.
whatsoever
I
to do
digress.
with. So I have I make reference to it in the back of my notes here, but I like to recommend a book for people. It's a it's something that if you have an open mind, it'll inform you and provide a lot of that information. You know, one of the good brothers, um, Mutashaka Barashango,
Mm-hmm.
he's got a book called European Holidays in Mental Genocide,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Um, that is an excellent book. If you get an opportunity to YouTube his videos. They're very powerful and very informative, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not, we're not trying to step on people's toes, but like you said
No,
earlier,
by no
we're trying to
means.
inform and wake people up.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And then you
Even though
touched
we
on it.
probably can get in trouble for this, this is us being
Oh,
woke.
I know we gonna catch out today, sis, after we get off of this thing here, right? And the other thing is, um, there is no evidence. You said this earlier. When I say no evidence, I'm talking about bones and stuff. Anybody who is a prophet in that book, there is no archaeological support in terms of bones. What did they brush their hair with? Where are the love letters between the people in the community? Nothing. But I like to
I think
stick.
they said they found Jesus's tomb though.
Nah, but there's no bones. There's no bones.
Well,
You can't have one, right? We're not doing
he
that.
evaporated though.
Yeah, we're not doing
Let me
that.
stop.
We're not doing that. We're not doing that. So in this, this goes to the Quran too. Sorry, but
Yeah.
there's no
Mm-hmm.
evidence.
Mm-hmm.
There's no, and so I'd like to, I'm not an Egyptomaniac. I like to reference ancient Kemet for those who don't know.
Right.
That is the name that the indigenous people of what you call Egypt would have called their country. Either Tamari or Kemet, right?
Oh, okay.
But we know that all those kings existed, right? You
Mm-hmm.
know, you got a couple hundred um, uh, centuries of bones, hair, bones, the clothing, the flip flops, the love letters, um, all
Yep.
type of evidence that our ancestors existed, right? They had a spiritual system, right?
Yep.
And so I think, it's okay to give them back their religious religious doctrine. You know,
Absolutely.
we can give it back to them, sis.
Mm-hmm. They can have it.
Okay. So the other thing is, um, it's one thing to talk about problem, but our discussions are based on providing solutions, for the community.
Right.
And so my simple, practical recommendation is either we return to the the spiritual systems that we practice before the transatlantic slave trade and colonization events. You don't practice anything at all, you know. But but we need to let go. They say don't let go of the rope of Allah, let go, right?
So I'm not opposed to people believing in whatever they want to believe in if that makes them a better individual. I can't tell you. I mean, if that's making you a better person, who am I to tell you that you're wrong? You know.
Right, right.
But if you're willing to listen to the truth, you know.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. So, um, the other thing is, so when we deal with, the journey of the souls, the salvation of the soul, and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that, because that's where we're gonna spend our time. What did our ancestors practice? What did they believe or let guide them? We're going to talk about two principal characters, and we'll get into some of the stories around them. But those stories will start sounding really familiar. is
Listen,
because
it
they
didn't start with
exist
us.
in some fashion in the Bible, right?
And oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for
So
sure.
let's jump into it. You go ahead. You want to say something?
No, no, I'm saying for sure the Bible is a real. Listen, it's a good book of stories. I feel like the
Right.
only thing different with the Bible is just uh not time. Oh my God, technology.
Yeah.
That's it. Everything else has happened.
So
You
we're
see it
going to
all in there.
focus on two principal characters,
Okay.
Haru, right? And Haru, really stood for. He has several attributes about him, right? So we're going to talk about
Right.
him. We're going to talk about his nature, right? And talk about some of the animal totems, so people understand the attributes around the characters, right?
Right.
And then we're going to talk about Set, Setuk, or Seth, however they want to couch that. But another solution is we're getting more feedback, but I encourage people to learn the Medu Neter, right? Learn, and I have Medu Neter in some of the slides here for the
Oh
family.
wait, really fast. I started reading this book today about from Queen Afua, and she references that in the beginning of the book, the Medu Neter.
Yeah, shout out to Hotep, to Queen Afua
Yep.
in the family, right? But yes, and the reason why it's important, we're not trying to trade religious dogma, right? But
Right.
the Medu Neter in the writings that they left behind are some of the most numerous uh, volumes of documents left by the ancient world, more so than all the other civilizations combined. And so we literally have a plethora and library of literature to read from. Some of it is spiritual, some of it is not, but we have literature. And then, like you said earlier, in terms of the moral systems, get back to practicing Ma'at, which is a moral system, right? And,
Right.
the Ngoza Saba, which is newer, right? It's, that's what Kwanzaa is really centered around. But it gives us daily principles that were created by us. We
For
practice
us.
Kuji Jakulia, right? Self determination. We decide what we want to practice and not, um, outside oppressors. And I encourage
Absolutely.
the family as we kind of go through all of that stuff is to, join and form study teams. And so we can have a discussion and dialogue about what it is that we're reading and learning. Okay. So let's deal with Haru and Set. This is just really to familiarize the family. I'm not going to go through all this detail, right?
Right.
The viewers can look it up on their own. But some of the qualities around Haru is, he's associated with, heaven or the sky, and and like I said, kingship. What are the qualities of a king? They're based on his attributes.
Well, wait a minute.
While
Did you explain who Haru was? I think you just went into.
Okay, thank you for making me back up the bus.
Yeah. I'm like, wait a minute.
So
I missed something.
in Kemet, or what they refer to as Egypt, right? There is a myth, a story that's been
Okay.
handed down for thousands of years, right? And it's a myth, it's a story, it's not real, but it's something that was developed by the elders of our communities to teach different points about life, morality, and spirituality,
So
right?
this is the Bible.
It's not the Bible. No,
No, I'm just like,
we no. It's a story. We have a
Okay.
collection of stories, right? Um, and it has characters in the stories, and so the characters in a particular story we call it the
I
Osarian drama,
heard that. I
right?
heard that.
And it's it's basically three principal characters, or four principal characters. There's Asar, which the Greeks called Osiris, right? It is Aset, which the Greeks called Isis. Their son, their holy son, Haru, which they called Horus, and Asar's brother, Set.
What is the
Right?
name of this book? I feel like I read this book before.
It's not a book. It's a collection. You can find text on it, right? But it's not a book. Don't think you can in
We
terms of
read
a
this
book.
in school. We read. I
Remember,
remember these
African.
names.
We have to remember that African information was passed down from generation to generation initially orally, right? And so when the people in Kemet started to write, right, they left behind text, right? Not as in textbook, but
Right.
in if you look at the example that I provided next to the overview, you see the characters of Heru and Set. And so what you see above that, the pictures, is writing, right? Is it's writing. And so, in the middle, it's saying something. I'm not going to get into all of, what it's saying.
Right.
Hopefully the family, you know, um, joins, right? But this is the literature right in front of us. And so it's called Medu Necher. And so the the Medu Necher are the writings that they wrote in stone. So anything that was sacred, they
Right.
wrote in stone. Anything related to like business, like tax collection and writing poems to one another, that was written in hieratic, right? And that's a cursive form of the Medu Neter,
Oh,
right?
okay.
It's just like we have a cursive form of
Yeah.
our Latin uh, uh, literature, right? And so the Medu Neter was meant to last forever, and that's why they recorded it in stone. And so they've literally left a lot of records like this for us to read. And I have a passage at the end, hopefully we can get to it. I want to be mindful of time, right? But, it's talking about when we show, the characters in the writing, we don't do lookership, like a comic book. We're guided by what the words say in the picture, right? So here it's talking about, over to the left, the overview, what are the qualities of these characters, right? One is heavenly, the other set is embroiled in the attributes around, chaos and storms and force. And here it provides the lineage of the characters in the story, right? Which I just named. Um, Haru is represented as a falcon, right? While Set is represented as an aardvark, right? And then when you get into the nature of these two characters, they start to sound familiar, like we've heard those characters before. So, like, I give you an example.
Okay.
When you study Haru in Asar or Horus and Osiris, you know, you'll notice that all the attributes that we would ascribe to Jesus, for example, are wrapped up in their attributes, right?
Oh.
King, right? King, heaven, right? And things of that nature. While Set, who's causing mischief and disorder, It sounds like Satan. So
Right.
Set became Satan, right? Ooh,
Mm.
I know people hair go back, but we got to remember that these stories are written literally, up to 3,000 in stone that we can find, about 3,000 years before the person Jesus has said to have existed. So we know that the story existed before, the characters in the Bible, right?
Right.
But there's the story of, while we're on it, you know, um, Set kills his brother. Sounds like Cain and Abel, right? He kills his brother, right?
That is absolutely Cain and Abel.
And the son, the wife is left without her husband, and she finds his body parts. Set had disassembled and chopped up the body parts and threw it in the Nile. And Isis, or Aset, traveled up and down to find all his body parts and reassemble him. And she forgot. She didn't forget. They couldn't find one piece, which was his member. Okay, which was his member, and
Wow.
um, and so the a divine spirit from heaven came down and remembered him, but they gave him a artificial, member, um, and she gave birth. Aset gave birth to a son without physical contact with a man. Sounds like
Mary.
marrying a virgin birth, right? And uh, he Haru goes and avenges his father, and who who is now supplanted by Set, who sits on the throne because Asar was the king after he was murdered, right, by his brother. His brother Set took the throne. Haru comes, and you know before he came of prominence, him and his mother had to hide in the wilderness. Sound like the Book of Revelation, the story of Jesus
Not
and
even
Mary.
that's or Moses' mom hid him in the woods too.
Yeah, yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
if this is the wilderness, and the thing is, so these stories you'll find in
Mm-hmm.
the temples at Edfu, and so on, that still exist to this day. You can go and look at them. This is just um, a photo of what you would find in some of those temples.
That's
Okay,
crazy.
so let me get into the nature of Haru, right? So he is fashioned after the animal totem, and I define what a totem is here, right? I define, and this is based on Wikipedia, right? Which everyone is used to. It's an animal that is revered, right? A lot of times worship. That's what revered
Mm-hmm.
means, right?
Mm-hmm.
Worship and adored by a particular group, often a
Mm-hmm.
family clan, and serves as a symbol, right, of their identity and connection to the natural world. It represents their what? Spiritual emblem, right? And can define the roles and the responsibilities within the group. Now, anybody can look up
Wow.
totem, right?
Right.
So,
Yep.
so like people use a cross, right? The
Mm-hmm.
cross is a symbol, right? It's a totem, right? But it's not an animal totem, right? It's not an animal totem, but it's a totem. It represents something. It represents something that's reverend, um, or venerated, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And so here, the falcon, you know, we talked about this before, right? Certain qualities about the falcon, but these are the ones that relate to the spiritual side, right?
Mm.
Vision in visual acuity, right? Swift, right?
Yes.
And when you look at the falcon is upright. You know, I got poor posture, but the falcon's got better posture than me. And it's because it's a symbol of regal. A lot of times people don't know
Yes.
what regal is. They think it's
Bougie.
a car, but it's royalty.
Royalty.
And so at some point, for those who can get a hold of this copy of this presentation, is a video, and it shows the nature of the falcon. So let me keep going, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here we have Set, right? And
I don't
here,
know what.
he's referred to, because I said Sutek. This is Sutek, Sutek. And then there's multiple ways of showing it. But here, as an animal totem, you know, aardvark simply means earth pig. You know, they got that snout like a pig. Um, and they're associated with night because they're nocturnal, right? They got sharp claws, right? Really sharp claws. And what they do is they destroy the termite in ant mounds. So if you ever see in nature what a termite mound looks like, it looks like a pyramid, right? And
Mm.
so, and it takes years to build, right? And so these are collections and organized insects as a community of laborers and planters. They build this huge mound, right? And then in an instant, this animal has no regard for all the labor and work and toil that they've done, and they completely destroy it, right? And so that's why Set, a lot of times the Greeks used to refer to Set as this mystical, typhonic uh, animal. And that's because, they would associate like the desert, the harsh desert, the harsh red desert
Mm-hmm.
with, Set. But, a lot of times Set is depicted with red hair. We talk about the devil and the pitchfork and all that good stuff. And what color is the devil all the time?
He's red.
He's red, right? And so a lot of times Set is depicted in red, and it's really because um, a lot of the species have pink, pale skin. Some of them do have red hair, but others are noted when they wallow on the ground. You can see the earth, right? The earth
Mm-hmm.
is red, and they end up picking up the color red. And again,
So,
here's a video for the family.
well, this is. Initially thought this was off topic, but today I was watching a video, and it was something about the gingers, the white people, that with the red hair, and how they're claiming to have been disassociated from white people, and they're claiming themselves as black. Which I
Yeah,
mean, it all ties in here with the red hair, and you know,
I leave that one alone, sis.
I know,
I'm
I just was
very
like,
grounded,
wow,
right? Yeah, yeah.
like wow.
So I know because we got, we're coming up on time, right? And I want to just get through it, and I don't want to be repetitive,
Right.
but the symbolism around these two characters is really based on the animal nature of the aardvark and the uh, the uh, the falcon. And the interesting thing is, in the story, uh, Heru defeats his uncle, but in the battle, he has his eye ripped out, right? Clawed out, right? And he has to go to his mother, and she goes to patch him up and nurture him and heal him. And that's why Aset is recognized as having healing properties. It's all related to the mythos in the story, right? And he goes back and he fights his uncle. I don't even use the term evil, right? He just played a role in nature. Um, and he defeats his uncle and he restores Kemet to kingship under his father's name, right? Okay. And so, one of the things that we want to touch on why this applies to us, right? Why this applies to us is because there's a struggle that we all experience. This is just a rendition. One of the most famous people in history, Ramses III, right, from the 19th dynasty. Here is being coronated, and you can see both Heru and Set um, um, basically recognizing him in his coronation when he becomes Nusut Biti or the king, right? And he's again, this is our evidence, right? This is evidence, right?
Yep, this
It's
is.
still there. I'll just move on beyond that. Um, but in the battle that I just referred to it, it's in the Medunetia is referred to as Rehwi, right? And um, it is all about that battle in struggle. In the Eye of Heru is because of that event in the myth. The eye is associated with protection. One, the protection of the mother, you know, because remember we did the Mother's Day and we talked about the mother protects, right? So she protected her son and she brought him back to good health, where he was able to restore his name and his character. So I want to get into this just really quick. This is another text. It's on the wall. It's a really simple inscription, but this text, corpus means body, evidence, dead body, whatever, but it means evidence, right? The proof. And this is located in Abydos. This is the Temple of Asar. What they say the Osirian, that's what they call it sometimes, the Temple of Asar. But one of the things that it says here is whenever DF and Ek Hem Nisut Tawi Jetta Hor Ast Heru, right? Which means, you know, he gives to you the wonderful existence of eternity, right? So this is the divine, giving to um to Heru, right? He's giving us Heru, which represents kingship, but his kingship um, is tied to him achieving divinity, and the reason why he achieves divinity is because when you get to Asar, he sits on the throne. In part of that, we get into. I'm just touching on symbolism, right? So we have the royal crowns of Kemet. This is just a few. We got the white crown, and we got the red crown. We refer to them as the Hejet. Hejet simply means white, and Deshret simply means red. And this is when you say Deshret or Desher, Desher actually means this is where you get the word desert from. Okay, this is where you get desert from, and then you have Bashet, which is the double crown, which is a crown inside of a crown. Kisei, do you ever see brothers wearing two hats at the same time, right? Well, this is what we were doing back in the day, right? But they have significance, esoterically or symbolically, right? The white crown is from Upper Kemet, which is the south. That's where they say in Egypt today. That's where all the black people live, right? you know, and then you have the Desheret, which is the red crown in the north, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
when they're unified and come together,
Mm-hmm.
um, you have the Peshet or the double crown. You have the double crown. And the thing is, from a spiritual perspective, we talk about the upper and lower. Well, Haru represents our higher self, right?
Mm-hmm.
In our spiritual nature, where Set represents our lower self, our carnal desires, right? In anger and things of that nature, right? But I always tell people, I said, that philosophy of like upper and lower
Mm-hmm.
in terms of location, upper Egypt and lower Egypt or Kemet. Well, the Jersey Shore, we have, right? I know
Up
you
the hill
know.
and down the hill.
We
Of
got up
course.
the hill and down the hill. So we still keep it still keep it a buck in referring to our communities because our communities, just like theirs, they're all spread out, but we're still related,
Mm-hmm.
right?
This is very true.
Up the
This is
hill is
very
still
true.
related to the down the hill people.
Absolutely. We all Neptune. At the
All
end
right,
of the day,
so
when it's time for us all to come together, we all Neptune.
I'm going to fast food this. I covered this in our second episode, but for some of the people who missed it, this system right here, is an individual, represents an individual who's deceased. This is ours, right? This is thousands of years before Jesus, right? He's being brought by this figure, Empu or Anubis, right? In the afterlife. And his heart is weighed on a scale, which represents his deeds, right? And you see Ma'at right here.
Mm-hmm.
Ma'at represents, what he's being judged by. Did he do Ma'at? Did he follow the 42 declarations of innocent? I will not kill. I will not, defile the temple. I will not take a man's wife, right? Those sound real familiar, right?
10 Commandments.
Right.
That's what
But
it sounds
those
like to me.
declarations, that's right. Those declarations of innocence already existed within our system, our spiritual system. And that's why I say we don't have to steal someone else's, we don't have to pick up some culture from Asia
Right.
or other cultures from the Americas, right? Because we have our own. But in this story, if the person has not led a moral life, he's devoured, right? By this
Mm-hmm.
monster looking thing, right? Which is eternal, represents like eternal damnation.
Oh,
And
wow.
if he has lived a moral and righteous life, then he's recorded, by Jehuti, in this case, the recorder or the writer, and he's brought by the son, Haru. Here's Haru, right? He's brought by Haru. He's holding life, right? The
Mm-hmm.
this represents life, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's brought he's brought to an abode, right? And here, who sits on the throne? His father, right? And
Mm-hmm.
this is Asar sitting on the square for my Freemasons out there, right? He's sitting on the square. You wonder all that where that stuff comes from. Where you go, and he is he has Ra Harakti, which means like Ra or the soul has risen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's brought to the person who grants the person afterlife or everlasting life. Does that sound familiar? Yeah.
Wow.
So
Wow. They just
I
stole everything from us.
yeah. So I'm going to continue to blow through this quickly, right? But if I refer to some of the work of George G.M. James, you got to get the book Stolen Legacy. Greek philosophy. Greek philosophy
You said
is
stolen legacy?
African history and philosophy. What's that?
You said stolen legacy?
Yes, I'm gonna refer to it. I'll show people the book at the end. Okay, so we still
Okay.
got some time. But in there, in terms of matriculating, by degrees, and you have someone who's dealing with the mundane or the initiate, someone who doesn't really have a lot of spiritual knowledge. Those are called the
Right. Right.
neophytes. They were referred to as neophytes or mortals, right? Neophytes or mortal. They
They
don't
would
have
be. They don't have what?
they don't have inner vision yet, right?
So this is what we would call a what do we call them nowadays?
This would be like a new priest, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can go and be a Christian priest or whatever, but when you're new, you don't have the insight of someone who's studied for 40 years,
Right.
right? So that's what a neophyte would be. But as you matriculate through the degrees, right, in your
Mm-hmm.
experiences,
Mm-hmm.
you start to get into the realm of the symbolic. The mundane is, oh, I know the story of Haru and Set and Asar and so forth. But you really don't. And when you start to understand the symbolic nature, then you're at the second degree here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And once you start to understand what they were really dealing with and talking about, then you start to develop inner vision, right?
Right.
You start to get your insights. And then as you really reflect on the nature and what they were doing, then you would be, a son of the light. That's what you would be referred to as the son of light, right? Or the son of the light. And, it means that your spiritual
Mm-hmm.
consciousness, awareness is there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You understand that these stories are really talking about the salvation of the soul, right? How to
Mm.
how to guide your life, what to get into, what to stay away from, right? And how that can affect your spiritual journey. And so, these are just some of the symbols that are referred that 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 are reflective by these two characters, right? One character represents the higher self, the other represents the lower self. One represents what is earthly, and the other represents what is in heaven or heavenly, right?
Mm.
You know, one represents, having good acute vision, and one represents, dullness. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and one represents spiritual aspiration in your true identity. When I say your true identity, the real you,
Right.
the eternal you, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not
Mm-hmm.
the you that is clothed in flesh,
Right.
right? The real you, right? And then one is reflective of, you know, the mundane nature, the ego, being focused on yourself, um, and not being able to see beyond, you know, um, what is put before you, because you haven't experienced contemplation and deep thought. And
Mm-hmm.
so to
Mm-hmm.
remove a lot of that psychological damage and trauma, right? We
Mm-hmm.
have to start with the restoration of the mind,
Mm. Renew your mind.
right? And get back into studying, at least study our own indigenous thought, right? Including Iwa Pele, which is good character, right? Um, and then, like I promised you, right? These are some of the books. This is Baroshengo's book. This is Stolen Legacy, right? For those of you get the PowerPoint, it has hyperlinks. You click on it, it take you directly to where you can purchase it. Um, the Temple of the Soul. These are more spiritual type of writings, or mysticism in dealing with holidays. And then we've talked about these before on the right. Living a life centered around Ma'at, learning to read, reading comprehension, illiteracy. In my view, from the conscious community perspective, you can't read Madhu Netzer, you're not conscious, or you're not literate. Excuse me, you're not literate yet. So we want to build literacy of African literature and text, and so I'm making those recommendations. And the divine does speak to us in many ways when we're
It
out on the
does.
beach, right? And we're reflecting like you do at 5 a.m. in the morning, or when I'm walking and I'm looking at the ant mounds on the football and baseball field and getting a learning, from that. But we have to look, listen, observe, be open minded in order to triumph, which is that's what we refer to as a hero. And the word hero comes from the word Heru, you know, the word horizon. The sun walking across the water is not Jesus walking across the water. It's looking at the sun coming up over the horizon like you experience every morning.
I love that.
And so that's all I have for the family.
Okay, well, that I mean, I feel like that's a great place to stop.
Yeah,
So, what
because
do we have to look forward? What do we have to look forward to next week? What are
well,
we
I
going to be
want to
going?
know what the
What's part
people are
two?
saying, right?
Okay,
So based on what the people are saying, if they want me to cover specific religions, I'm up for it. I don't think
okay.
they're gonna be up for it. The Jehovah Witness do not stop at my house. I invite him in all the time, but they do not come in here.
And see that's whacked me because I'm like, listen, I don't. We can agree to disagree as long as if you have something that's gonna make you a civilized person, I don't mind you talking about it. You know,
Absolutely,
you
absolutely.
don't want to talk to me about it. That just makes me feel like what you scared for,
Yeah, because you're not
right?
supposed to know what's in the book. That's what I always hear. So
Well,
I'm encouraged, sis.
absolutely, I am too. I see you. I didn't even see you had your That's not a dashiki though. What is this
No,
called?
this is a so this is a hoodie. I support the my brothers and sisters who, we do cooperative economics, right? My babies, my babies bought me this, right? But this is a collar. So when you look at when you look at the Nasut Biti, right? You always see they got we say pop your collar. You remember we used to say pop your collar,
Yeah, I
right?
still say it.
Yeah. So you'll notice, and you go to like so here this is the collar, right? You see this from Kemet all the way down to South Africa.
Now, does your shirt have a fringe on it? Because my cousin he wears one like that, but it has fringe on the bottom. He explained all that too.
No,
He'd be a
no,
good
no. This
person to
is
come
this
on
is
here.
just this is
Oh,
just a sweatshirt. I mean a
oh
hoodie.
no no no. He
This is
wears like
just
a
a
shirt that represents this. He'd be a good person to come on here. Like it
yeah.
has something to do with like this
I
stuff.
got
But
something like that. I got some other wares, right? We got some other woo wares, in the house, that we'll rock at a later time.
all right, well, let's go ahead and wrap this up for the night. Good people, we thank you so much for tuning in with us. And make sure you are back with us next Sunday. We're still trying to figure out.
I got one more thing before you. They better get your body butter.
Yes,
They better
I'm
get
actually better go.
Tuesday's viral body butter.
I was going to get there. Please order some more viral butter. I'm gonna have to viral body butter. I'm actually going downstairs to make some now. I'm so exhausted. It's ridiculous.
I
But
know.
yes,
You work hard,
um,
sis.
I do. I do. I just want to find a rich husband for real. No, I don't. I'm lying. But
Yeah, no, you don't. Because you got it. Because you know why? Because in our culture, a female can be the king.
I am. I am King Kisei. King
Candace.
Queen Kisei. I am.
Yeah.
But no, yeah. I'm the same. A rich husband, please. I would still get my own money. That's just who I am. But
That's what's up.
please, yes, support the habits. I just got a notation saying that my book is finally done. So the book is finally done. That will be
Another thing to
available
promote.
soon too. Yeah, another thing to promote. So we'll talk about that too. I'm actually gonna be talking about that tomorrow on Don't Hate Monday at 7 a.m. So please join me live for that. Um, Join us here next week. I have to definitely drop another conversation with Keith. Say I have so many in the lab that I just need to go ahead and drop it. But please stay tuned for part 2 of this amazing topic next week. We look forward to seeing you then.
Like and subscribe.
Yes, please like and subscribe. We appreciate you.
Hotep.
Peace out. Hotep.
Hotep.
Oh no! Nas! Get back!